what's up everybody? I hope you're all fantastic. I want to thank you so much for checking this video out. If this is your first time here to the channel, I want to welcome you to the Silver Screen Analysis. Today we are talking about the fifth film in the Conjuring Universe, that being The Nun, starring Taissa Farmiga, Demi Bichir, and directed by Corin Hardy. I've enjoyed this connected universe of films so far. I think other than the first Annabelle, its sequel and the two Conjuring stories were all solid genre films that gave us nice effective doses of suspense with traditional horror elements, while at the same time giving us stories and cast performances that made us genuinely feel invested. I'll admit the trailer for this one didn't look too bad at all, but it didn't really look overly fresh either, and sort of gave me the impression of being a little bit on the gimmicky side, but it could have just been how the trailer was cut, so I definitely went into this one with no preconceived notions, and I was optimistic given the track record of these connected films so far. The story is set in Romania in the early 1950s. A priest and a novitiate are sent from the Vatican to investigate the death of a nun at a secluded monastery, and it's more than enough for a serviceable backdrop for a dark, eerie horror film, which at times it certainly was. Unfortunately, it was also overly procedural in some steps, with a lack of focus in the overall tone. It wasn't a bad movie, but it was just disappointing as I felt it failed to meet its potential. It does start out with some almost instant intrigue being created. I thought the backdrops and the locations were all perfectly tailored for the cold, ominous tone of the script. I thought the first act did build some interest very quickly, and with an imposing musical score, I was really finding myself getting pulled into the world of this film and the atmosphere that it was creating. I was also connecting with the characters. I thought Bichir and Farmiga both brought a real grounded presence to their roles, and with some nicely crafted dialogue, I thought the charm from their characters was coming out very effectively to resonate with me, despite neither one of them having much backdrop. So with a strong first act, I was feeling pretty good about this one, and then the second act got going and it seemed to opt for different directions instead of story building. Characters began to conveniently be isolated so we could get more of the just walking down dark halls at night with ominous figures passing in the foreground and the background without the character noticing, to build some suspense, which it did at times, but not all the time. Some of these scenes worked to build some creepy moments with some clever setups, but there was a lot of other ones that I honestly would have never expected to see in this universe of films, as they felt kind of recycled and gimmicky in the genre. But it wasn't a deal breaker. I just felt the entire middle of this movie seemed to kind of repeat the scenario over and over again, and it just created a choppy flow with a series of jump scare setups that had more of a haunted house vibe than anything, which wasn't really what I was hoping for. Admittedly, the third act is redeeming with some fun horror moments that do build some strong intensity. I wouldn't say they were scary moments at all, but with a commanding score and some sinister visuals, I thought many of these scenes did do a solid job of creating some uneasiness and tension while watching. I thought the overall framework to the story was more than serviceable. I enjoyed the build-up and the foundations of the plot. I enjoyed the crafting of the tie-ins to the universe that this script wove into its storyline as well. However, I didn't really enjoy the path it took to tell itself. It felt more like a movie that was trying to appeal to a mass audience with a lot of theme park style jump scares and a very in-your-face approach, rather than building true sinister evil through storytelling. But like I said earlier, I thought the performances were great. I think both Bichir and Farmiga pour a lot of realism into their roles. They hit all the emotional intensity with success, and I definitely think they elevate the material, as the script routinely opts for some thin visual storytelling, which they make work. They also have a great chemistry with one another that wasn't necessarily attention grabbing, but did do a good job of capturing that newly formed alliance that they had. I thought the dialogue early on was able to weave a natural sense of humor that, like I said, gave the characters some grounded charm, but unfortunately, as the film closes out, a particular character whose sole intent in this one is to serve as the comic relief does get forced into relentless attempts at humor. His charisma did add a nice dynamic to the movie early on, but the script goes to him way too many times as it tries to close out. So scenes that should have been building intensity and suspense and making me fear for my lead characters honestly just felt like punchlines at times. The story would pull me in and then a forced joke would push me right back out of it. I wanted a movie that would ramp up and go all out with a climactic showdown versus evil, and instead it felt like more of a part of a third act from one of the Mummy movies. Then the next scene would try to take itself seriously and try to cram in layers of story that could have been seeded way earlier in the movie, rather than just having one jump scare attempt after the other with characters just wandering around in the dark, either inside or outside. So while I didn't hate this movie, it didn't lure me in like it very easily could have. I thought the direction, it was solid. It was more traditional and didn't have that trademark flow that I love in these movies, but it did the job. I thought the production design was nicely done as well, with some great sets that had a lot of depth and eeriness to them. The makeup and the special effects were also very well done to capture both the time period and the dreary locations. But I do think the lighting for a bulk of the film was lacking. It could have been the projection from the screening that I was watching, but it was just an overly dark film. Not like saturation of color, but just dark. It was hard to see many of the scenes, and with some quick editing at times, it wasn't the most viewer-friendly experience either. And overall, I'm going to give The Nun 65% on the entertainment meter. It had its moments that delivered, but unfortunately there were many more that didn't. The story pacing was a little bit uneven. There were some story elements that were kind of glossed over with surface level explanation that could have been explained a lot more had the story itself been more of an emphasis on the filmmaking side. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that thumbs up button, share it with your friends, leave a comment. I love to hear from you guys. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you can be alerted when all the new videos pop up. All my social media links are going to be down in the description below. You can also visit the Silver Screen Analysis for a wide range of movie-related content, and here's some links to some recent reviews just in case you missed them.